ADHD is easy to say, but the words in the acronym don't make any sense since you probably already heard it explained. I'll be quick. Attention. Yes, okay, it has a lot to do with attention. Deficit. Nope, it's not a deficit. It's an attention diversion. Hyperactivity. Nope, a lot of people with ADHD aren't hyperactive. Physically anyway. You could say their brain is hyperactive. Disorder. Not a nice word. Something like condition would sound better. Still better than the older names for it. Before 1980, it was called hyperkinetic impulse disorder. And before it was officially described, people were using terms like organic brain disease, minimal brain dysfunction, and clumsy child syndrome. Dr. Edward Hallowell is a psychiatrist who's worked in the world of ADHD since 1981. That's longer than a lot of you have been alive. I remember 1981 when the M in MTV meant music. I was in 8th grade, way into Dungeons and Dragons and Heavy Metal magazine, and viciously teased by a lot of my classmates and some of my teachers because I wasn't only a nerd, I was a dumb nerd. Anyway, Hallowell. He's written tons of books on the subject, the most familiar being the Driven to Distraction series. And lately, people have been talking a lot about one of his ideas. In his latest book with co-author Dr. John Ratey, he introduces a new acronym, VAST, Variable Attention Stimulus Trait. Trait is so much better than disorder. I like it. Variable attention. Nice. It's like, stop the presses, everyone needs to be on board with this, right? Of course that would mean adjusting the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Wouldn't that be DSM-MD? It's the go-to book for doctors to make a diagnosis and for insurance companies to look for reasons not to pay for treatment. It's called the DSM-5. Just change the verbiage in the next book, right? Here's the thing though, a revision of the DSM takes a board of some 160 researchers and clinicians, and they all gotta agree. They'd all have to be on board with the idea, and right now it's basically an idea of just two guys, and then you'd have to get the public on board. The term ADD was ushered out years ago by the American Psychiatric Association and the DSM-5, but people still say it instead of ADHD. A lot of people think if someone's not hyperactive, they shouldn't be labeled ADHD. The tallest building in Chicago has been the Willis Tower for 11 years, and people still call it the Sears Tower. Don't even get me started on Sean Combs. So even if the general public didn't find it confusing, how long do you think it would be until they were on board with the change? Don't get me wrong, I think VAST is a far better name, vastly better. But here's the thing, regardless of whatever you read somewhere, or what podcast you've listened to, or whatever YouTube video you've watched, VAST is not really the new name for ADHD. ADHD will still be ADHD. ADD will still be ADHD. VAST kind of goes along with the everybody has a little ADHD idea. That's most often demonstrated by the fact that most people can't sit at a table or wait for a bus or take a dookie without checking their phone. VAST will include people with ADHD, but also include people who don't have ADHD but can't get through their day without constant dopamine hits. Instagram, TikTok, Roblox, Among Us, Twitter if you're angry, Facebook for the old folks. Not to mention a news cycle that's turning over like every 20 minutes, bringing us new clickbait headlines like those old Permashave signs. Except these days you can't get off the highway and away from those signs. So many of us don't use our phone for its intended purpose because there's not a big enough dopamine payoff in a conversation with family and friends. We text instead, we can have multiple conversations going, and each incoming message is a new dopamine hit. So VAST, instead of being a new and better name for ADHD, will include everyone affected by all the stuff I mentioned, whether they have ADHD or not. And suddenly, I don't like it as much. I mean, it's on point, but I was hoping to change the deficit and disorder in ADHD. Plus, I think it could muddy the waters because so many people already think ADHD is overdiagnosed and they don't take it seriously. Not to mention the people who claim to have ADHD with no diagnosis, or the people that ADHD people insist have ADHD, like half the celebrities on the celebrities with ADHD list. The only condition I can think of that's similar in this case is autism. We've got all these assumptions floating around about people like Sir Isaac Newton and Mozart being autistic without any way to confirm it. You've got highly regarded autism websites claiming people like Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Gates have autism when the third-party evidence is like a conspiracy theory at best, and neither claim to have it. In fact, Seinfeld adamantly denies it. Making an assumptive diagnosis of ADHD ADHD or autism for a celebrity based on observation is like saying Joe Cocker had cerebral palsy. Stories like that contaminate the message and make it harder for people to take the matter seriously. I think making too much of a connection between VAST and ADHD is problematic like that. I'm not saying VAST isn't a problem. My wife is an ADHD and she definitely fits the VAST description. I call her Miss 3 Screens. But ADHD is a neurological condition where VAST is more like an addiction. Sure, it has something to do with the brain, but it also has to do with your surroundings and society. Like with gambling or sex or compulsive shopping. Not everyone with a gambling or shopping addiction has ADHD, and I think most of us already recognize that. And I think we should look at VAST the same way. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If I earned your subscription, please hit the button and the bell. My kid also makes videos. I'll link her at the end. Thanks for watching. Stay out of the comfort zones.
Mars, the only planet we know of inhabited totally by robots. 8 robots have successfully landed on Mars.